the intent of disruption from a kingdom perspective is to restore, whereas shock functions as a grenade that just blows up without any consciousness about the outcome. Hi, and welcome to Storia, where storytellers disrupt. I'm David Noroña.
And I'm Fabiano Altamura.
Remember to subscribe, like, download, and give us that 5-star review.
You know, today we pride ourselves, I think, somewhat in the idea of what is disruptive storytelling. But I feel there's a difference between disruptive storytelling in the world and disruptive storytelling in the kingdom.
Yep.
Or especially from the audience point of view, right? Mm-hmm. I think when you look at Jesus, he was always very disruptive, but we probably approach this very differently in some ways, just from a style point of view, I think. But what is disruptive storytelling to you?
I think for me, it has to do with the ideas. We teach so many classes that kind of go after this idea of storytelling. You've got theology of the art. I've got kingdom storytelling. In kingdom storytelling, I think one of the principles, one of the things that we think about and talk about, because it's a foundational kind of paradigm thing for all of our artists at school, is just how we view God and how we view story itself. So I think we have to remember that first, God, the ultimate storyteller, is a loving storyteller, right? So he's coming at it from the heart. In terms of the word disruptive, when I look at the parables and I look at Jesus, I find that his ideas are the disruptive thing. So it's not to say that style doesn't matter, or concept or directorial approach or writing style or voice. All of these things, sure, I think they add to the idea of disruption. But I think for me, the core of disruption comes from ideas.
Yeah, because I think sometimes as directors, depending on your style and your bent, we want to provoke, we want to shock at times, right? But I think we're seeing that a lot. Nowadays, right? I mean, we're seeing a lot of things that we think really are really shocking, but I just think they're old and boring. Listen, you want to do a nude scene in a film, it's become boring.
So let me ask you a question, because that's an interesting word or distinction to kind of go after. I don't think you do, but do you see disruption and shock as synonymous? And if not, how would you define them as different?
No, I don't. I think shock is grossly self-indulgent. If you're trying to shock your audience, I don't think that's good artistic storytelling. I personally don't.
So do you think it's a matter of intent and heart posture of author or storyteller, of whoever's in control of the piece? Do you think that intention is the main difference between shock and disruption?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say disruption and shock were synonymous.
No, not synonymous. I'm actually wondering if you think that they're, if not the opposite, very different, and if so, how?
Yeah, because Jesus was a disruptor. When he fashioned the whip in the temple, right? And he then patiently, in his own time, not reactively, responsively, then went and upturned all the tables, because you have made the house of the Lord into a den of thieves. So I think that was disruption to restore back to holiness.
So then it's the heart posture or the intent of the disruptor, storyteller, director, whatever. It's the idea or the heart posture. And then on top of that, it's also kind of like the end goal as well, is what distinguishes disruption from shock or these other things that look like disruption, but they're not.
Right, because I think, something like shock would be, it's disruptive. I don't think it is. It's just it's the difference between what could be offensive and disruptive, I guess. I think disruption is shaking the foundation so that we can be taken to that next level of glory, I think.
What I hear you say, which is really cool, and I think I really deeply agree with it, is that the intent of disruption from a kingdom perspective is to restore, whereas shock functions as a grenade that just blows up without any consciousness about the outcome.
Right. And for me, I mean, listen, I don't know. I'm sure there is obviously a place for that in storytelling. I'm not sure I subscribe to that. I think that, even in the Passion of the Christ, I think that
You mean like the
Mel's
film, or do you just mean like in general?
the film.
Okay, yeah.
I think it was gratuitous.
Really?
Have you not seen it?
Oh, no. I mean, I've seen it. Do you think it was gratuitous? I would actually say that it is shocking.
It's definitely shocking.
It's definitely shocking, but it was also true.
But it was true. But nobody has ever really done what Mel had done.
He visualized the brutality.
He visualized it. Because like when Robert Powell did it in Jesus of Nazareth, it was kind of like it felt like a production of the RSC doing Jesus. He was... It was a beautiful piece. Zeffirelli directed it, but I mean, it wasn't what Mel Gibson did in The Passion of the Christ. That's where I believe you can use shock.
I agree.
To actually highlight the point of, guys, we've made this really clinical. Mm-hmm. It was gratuitous and shocking because that's what happened.
I see. I think when I hear the word gratuitous, not to mince words or whatever, I think when I hear the word gratuitous, it's like you went too far, it was too much, is my understanding of the word gratuitous. I know what you mean. It was overwhelming. Mm-hmm. It was, but I think it was the first time that, honestly, I think I understood what Jesus actually physically went through. I don't think I understood it till then, man. I mean, you can read it in the scriptures. You can teach it as a Sunday school teacher. I know you have, I have, right? We say Jesus died on the cross for us. We say that, I don't even know that I actually taught, the whipping and what happened in the court outside of, maybe the Pontius Pilate and the dialogue and, the conversation about the dreams. But, typically with kids, you're not going to go in that far. It's probably scary and it would probably be maybe, I don't know, some might disagree too much. Maybe there's a time and an age. I believe I've watched it with all of my kids other than my daughter.
Yeah.
And I think we watched it and we made it a point to watch it once we felt that I think our youngest boy at the time, Isaiah, was ready. Mm-hmm. Because I think I wanted him to understand on some level, to understand of course, the divinity of Christ, but the humanity of what this God man did for us. Anyways, for me, it was the first time that I understood it.
Yeah, and I think what you also saw was how disruptive Jesus was as a person.
Always.
Even the fact, and this is disruption, the fact that he chose not to say a word in the midst of being beaten and brutally murdered, and still disruptively said on the cross, Father, forgive them for they know not what they do. And we see Jesus, sometimes we see perfection, right? When you're looking and you go, how can I play Jesus? Perfect. It's so easy. It's just so one-dimensional. I'm like, if you play a perfect character, you are choosing to say no to every sin and indulgence by will, that I'm not mastered by anything, which means, oh my goodness, this guy is harder than every character to play because every other character dealing with tremendous conflict, obviously, but like dealing with more conflict than anybody's ever dealt with, ever.
And then from another perspective, from a perspective that we can't even possibly begin to understand. So the best we can do, it's almost like any biopic, right? You hear this, I was listening to Tom Hanks talk about playing Colonel, the Colonel that, helped promote, the promoter behind Elvis Presley in the last film. It's a fantastic podcast, which I recommend everybody listen to. Guy Raz does this hour-and-a-half interview. And he walks through his acting process. He walks through how he developed the character. He walked through how he got to know the Presley family, and how their assessment of this man was different than the myth of the man. How the man had a tremendous amount of humanity, but he was a carny, and so he had this salesman snake oil thing about him as well. But he talked about how, and you hear this almost from every actor that actually has to play, and I've actually played two human beings, Irving Berlin and Frankie Valli, and I'll tell you that, on a good day, you can find some approximation of some of their little aspects, voice gate, but really you're playing an aspect or a version of, and I wonder if it's the same about Jesus. But, back to this idea of disruption, this thought occurred to me. We say that Jesus was a disruptor, but I wonder sometimes when I think about people who are disrupting, you think about the kid in the class who makes the fart joke, right, or disrupts the teacher. Clearly Jesus, we're not saying that Jesus was that kind of disruptor. I think when we say that Jesus was a disruptor, it's less a commentary on Jesus's personality or him being this character, and more a commentary on the culture and the reality that he was inserted into that needed to be blown up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I wonder if you could use another word, maybe that disruption or disruptor is restoring the standard.
I like the idea of restoration deeply.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Because it gives us an intent. It gives us a reason why someone comes in. If I come in just to blow something up or because I disagree with you, which is what we see right now on social media, I just disagree with you, so I'm going to annihilate you. We can't handle disagreement anymore. I don't think that's the kind of disruptor Jesus was. I think Jesus came with the Father's heart into a culture that, and frankly, I think he was also disrupting how people were talking about his Father.
Yeah, 100%.
He came as a son saying, that's not who my Father is. And that's not who your Father is.
And your tradition was without power, and it's not a direct representation of heaven. I mean, as storytellers, I believe that our job is to show heaven on earth.
Right.
You know,
so maybe we're always disrupting. If we're not seeing heaven on earth, then is it our job to disrupt this current reality so that we can see the face of God? And that, I don't know if I fully fleshed that out, what that looks like if I'm directing a mainstream play, but I think that, I think it was Ivana Chubbuck, who is a very mainstream acting coach, and I think it was Monster, where... Oh, Halle Berry.
That was Monster's Ball.
Oh, right.
I think it was Charlize Theron playing Monster.
Okay.
And at the end, it says every character's got to have some semblance of hope.
Oh, that's good.
And basically what happened at the end, Charlize Theron's character kind of pounded the floor, and she was like, there's no hope in that. So when you pound the floor, then look up, that gives a semblance of hope, which I like that idea.
Well, I think what we're starting to get at, and this I deeply, deeply believe, and I think it's really important for the church to understand. I think it's important for all storytellers that want to be kingdom storytellers. Because listen, if we say kingdom storytelling, we're not just trying to sell a book because we put kingdom on top of it or something like that. It's not Jesus frosting. It's not religious frosting. I think what we're saying is that we're defining storytelling, the very intent and definition of it, by that qualifier right before it. So it's not just an adjective, it's a mission. It's a belief that if you're going to tell a story, it has to be unto building the kingdom with everything that means. And so far what I hear you say, which I love, is it's got to be about restoration. It's got to be about hope. It's got to be about revealing the Father in some way, shape, or form. And we're not talking about Pollyanna storytelling that just looks like a PureFlix film. That's not what we're saying. It's what it often gets interpreted into. I actually think that being a kingdom storyteller can be quite provocative.
Oh, I mean, goodness me, did Jesus not? I mean, provocative. Okay, here's the thing.
Meaning like it can provoke thought. I'm not talking in the sexual way.
No. I'm not meaning that. Provocative or evocative.
It's good. I mean,
it evokes a response. Like, you and I prefer, rather than kind of, always kind of paying everything off, like always answering every question. It's leaving the audience somewhat hanging, so they can go away and think. I remember I was reading, do you remember the artist Seal?
Oh, I love Seal.
So I had one of his albums. I can't remember which one it was.
Is it the one with the black and white cover?
I think it is. Yeah. And I was looking through album. And he was like, I never write my lyrics in my whatever, what were they called, those inserts?
Oh, like the sleeves.
The
cover art and stuff,
because, one day you may come and you may sing a song and it may be completely nothing that I'm singing about. And then, it's like...
We're all like the 7-year-old. Have you ever caught yourself? You've heard this song 100 times. You're like...
Absolutely. It's like Michael Jackson songs. I can't understand a word. His diction is so bad.
It's always Shimon and...
Shimon and he. So I love that about it. It's like you can decide what the lyrics are somewhat. And the question really, if we qualify everything to the audience, I think we insult them.
Well, okay, so here's another principle that we talk about at BCA a lot, that maybe the best thing that a storyteller can do is to ask really great questions.
Great questions.
Versus feeling compelled to answer all of the questions before the audience has even had time to wonder what
Right.
you're asking.
The one thing you want to try and get rid of is exposition.
Yes.
As much as possible, I think.
Yeah, well, listen. Some of it is necessary, right? Because we've got to know where the heck we are
Right.
and who people are. But,
Right.
but if you do it well, if you
Yeah.
if you give me location, if you give me great action and circumstance, and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
theme is blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. All right, so
Oh, hi. So you're the 48-year-old doctor from Boston, Massachusetts, who really...
I was talking to my screenwriters the other day, and they were like, "Well, David, so what does bad exposition sound like?" I said, "It sounds like when one character says to another character that character's name, age, and something they already know that the other character already knows. That's when the exposition." I said, "If you do that, I will punch you." So, anyways, they got the message loud and clear. All right, so we've established. There's a couple of other themes that we explore in Kingdom Storytelling as well, and at BCA, which is I won't remember them all, but it's I do have this little kind of preachy thing where we use the words that start with RE, just because the prefix RE always refers back to an original intent. So it makes me think about how if we want to truly understand the Father's desire for relationship for us, we're not going to dive into the to the book of Isaiah or Kings or Solomon's one of Solomon's Ecclesiastes. We probably have to go back to the original blueprint of us walking in paradise as son and daughter in communion with him, right? So original intent, that those words that start with always like return, means to come back to the original place. So
Relax.
no, that's
Frankie
the word
Goes to
that
Hollywood
describes, no, that describes the music Fab likes to listen to when he cuts your hair. It's like flowetry.
Oh, flowetry, come on. There you are.
Now everybody's going to go on a rabbit trail.
Yeah.
Okay, so listen, there's words like reformation, restoration, redemption.
Is it Renaissance?
No, but that would be a good one.
Yeah. Rebirth.
Which means
reborn.
rebirth.
That's why I always say this, like, we talk about the Renaissance.
That's
And you look at
Renaissance for
Renaissance.
the Americans.
Renaissance means reborn, to be born again.
Naissance, yeah, from French.
Right?
To be, yep.
So Jesus said to Nicodemus, you must be born again.
Oh, wow.
You must be reborn, Renaissance.
You got a Renaissance.
You know what I mean? So anyway, going back to it, but I think though, the idea of disrupting storytelling is restoring to order.
All right, so let's talk about this. So the first half, we unpacked this idea of kingdom storytelling, God's and Jesus's perspective and take on story. I'm wondering if you want to take a gear shift with me and now observe the kind of storytelling that we are seeing more and more of that doesn't walk and talk and feel like kingdom storytelling. When you look at the landscape of episodic television, even what's happening in theater and whatever, what's your observation? How would you describe it and its intent, its ethos, what's under the hood?
Specifically when you look at pilots, for example, right? I mean, like I would say that it's...
Pilot is a first episode of any series, yeah.
Yeah, I think that they're following a formula that they have to add some level of, well, for one, if you look at a lot, like you see that they might put some kind of sexual content, they will overdo language, and then it kind of tapers off if the series gets picked off, just because they have to satisfy the network's, A through Z of making a pilot, with the idea of exploring, sexuality and all that kind of stuff. I think it
feels like the least common denominator.
It does. It feels like painting by numbers.
So I remember before I came up to Reading and I was in LA and you were still back in the UK and stuff. This was probably, I don't know, like 15, a little bit over 15 years ago. I had started to notice a trend, in a way, it says that, I don't know, what's the expression? Life reflects art, art reflects life, and this kind of concept that you can kind of get a pulse of where culture is at or where culture is headed. And quite often it's actually the artists who tend to be the first sent into battle, right? You see the Lord send the worship leaders, the artists.
Yeah.
First, it was Bezalel. You're teaching on Bezalel that he's the first spirit-filled craftsman, artist, right? God chose to indwell an artist first. Fascinating concept that the artists are oftentimes the first feelers, the first EMT workers in culture, but they can also then now not just feel what's happening in the zeitgeist, right? But they can also begin to bend things and skew things. That's the power of art. The power of storytelling is to actually, we've all heard, I'll butcher it, but I'll paraphrase something like, he who tells the best story wins. In other words, he who tells the best story is going to shape what we believe.
Well, that's even what Jim Morrison said, isn't it? Isn't it? He who has the media shapes thought.
100%.
So
I remember when... So broadcast TV is like here in the States, if you're listening from the U.S., it was like all the standard channels that had commercials. So ABC, NBC, these kinds of things. Typically, because of the FCC, the Federal Commission and whatnot, there's certain things that broadcast TV couldn't do, but HBO and Showtime and the cable channels could. So it was always expected that if you were auditioning for a cable show, you would see a lot of what you're seeing now. Obviously, this is pre-streamers. There wasn't, all this stuff. So broadcast TV was sort of like the last holdout, if you will, of some form of conservatism when it comes to like moral stuff. But I'll never forget when it was like not just one pilot during pilot season, which is when all the actors are auditioning for pilots, but then it was the next one, and it was the next one, and it was the next one. And I remember at one point I'd gotten saved, and like the only project that came my way had to do with like a pedophile priest. And I'm like, okay, hey, we can have a whole conversation with him.
Yeah, of course.
Obviously, some things have taken place. There's some unfortunately tragic truth to that, but it is not the whole truth about the church with a capital C. And at the time, I made a decision not to necessarily defend what the Catholic Church may or may not have done, but I just decided personally, I was like, well, if the only character I'm going to play this year is a pedophile priest, and that's my only contribution this year, from my perspective, of my pearls, is this what I'm going to choose to do with the ability that God has given me?
Right, unless the outcome of the story was disruptive in the terms of restoring it to order.
Oh, no, it was about a psychopathic plastic surgeon who was also psychopathic, and I thought at that
point. Got to realize why do we want to tell these stories? Because like, if I watch a lot, and we're both actors, I'm like, I ask myself the question now, what stories do I actually want to tell and be part of? And like, okay, yeah, you can do a story for a paycheck and you can do all these things, but I'm like, what do I want to tell now?
Well, now you're asking a question about responsibility too. And now here we're shifting into not just a consumer of story, because there is some modicum of responsibility there, right? We're responsible for what we take in, right? The Lord says in Philippians, meditate on these things, noble, righteous, pure, good, lovely. Meaning, and it's meditation in terms of like the way that a cow chews, right? And brings into one's body these things. The Lord says we're responsible for for our eyes, for our mouths, for these types of things. He says these are the things that if we're made impure, that's how we're made impure, right?
Right.
So we're talking about consuming and watching. And that's a whole topic of conversation. I've even been convicted about, actually, I may not be playing the character. I may not condone it in quote unquote real life. But if I'm watching fictional characters do it, in some sense, am I a voyeur of the very thing that I don't condone? This is something I've struggled with and thought about.
Yeah, and I think there's a point where we go like, not all stories, right. Not all stories are going to inspire you, challenge you. They could be just for entertainment, and that's fine. Like Claire and I watched Bad Boys the other night, and all right, despite the language.
It's a deep study of brotherly love.
It is, and Michael Bay is a very, very deep director. It's
nuanced.
It's very nuanced, no,
but why did you watch it? Why did you watch it? What do you enjoy about it?
Do you know why?
I'm not. I remember watching it too, but I'm curious why you watched it.
At times, I think there's an element of it's okay to have some level of escapism.
Yeah, and to laugh.
And to watch Will Smith and Martin Lawrence joke about.
They're funny.
They are funny, and I'm not saying Martin Lawrence is a great actor by any stretch of the imagination. He's definitely not Eddie Murphy.
But he does what he does.
He does what he does well.
Did you ever watch The Martin Show? Did you ever watch
No,
Martin?
I didn't. No.
Oh, listen, man. So, actually, because I know you're a fan of like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and stuff.
Yeah.
And it was around, it was of that time. It was of that time. Martin actually plays like half a dozen characters, including a couple characters that live in the building that are on par with Eddie Murphy's work.
They are they're similar. I think you can tell he tries to do a bit like Eddie Murphy, but Eddie Murphy obviously was the original.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not going to tell you.
Fun.
I'm not going to tell you who I love watching. It's probably too controversial.
Well, go for it. I mean, you don't have to, but
listen.
I mean, you can't tease the audience like that.
From his stance, from entertainment, and a point of view of disrupting. Now, hear me out. There is a caveat with this, and this guy is a Brit. He does not profess any faith whatsoever.
I know where you're going.
And I don't like all of his stuff, so I'll just say that. But when it comes to Ricky Gervais, like he bought something very, very new when he bought the mockumentary of The Office in.
Absolutely.
You know, and I'm not saying that, but his character and the way you think, it was just a funny piece of writing. That was like scientific what they did.
Oh, no, listen. So I watched the British version at a run. Like I was behind the times. I was here in the States. I remember still being back in LA and people were talking about it. And I remember when I first saw it, I thought to myself, I'm so confused. Is this, and like I'm pretty well versed, right? I've watched a ton of TV audition for it. And I honestly, at first I was like, is this like a BBC documentary? Like it was pretty convincing. If you knew nothing about it, and as an American, I was like, I knew very little about it. I watched it all. Like I binged watch in the early days of binge watching. I forget even how I got access to it. I don't know if it was on DVD or whatever it was, early days of Netflix. I watched it all. Highly inappropriate things in the British version, completely over the edge in spots. It'd be tough for me to watch it today, just only because my own like thing inside, like I'm just in a different space personally. But anyway,
of course,
there is no doubt. You can agree, you can disagree with his morality. You can have questions about the content, but Ricky Gervais is a genius. If you watch Derek, if you watch Extras, on and on and on and on and on. He's got a crazy mouth, absolutely. But man, as a storyteller, and I have to say, I gained a lot of respect for him as time went on. I don't like everything that he does. You and I have talked about some of the speeches and stuff, but some of his character work, I have to say, man, it's pretty darn phenomenal.
He's very talented, and I think he's disruptive in the sense that he's like everything should be on the table to be talked about. I'm not sure.
He's going after honesty.
Yeah, after honesty. I don't know how I feel about that. There is brutal honesty. I'm not sure how I feel about that or how he actually executes it. But, for me, that element of he created a new genre. In effect.
He did.
And I like that. So, yeah.
One, by the way, that it took the States a while to catch onto. He had a love-hate relationship, I think, with the NBC one in that, I think, and I've heard many Brits, including you, say, the American version compared to the British version. And I 100% know what you're saying. I think, as a side note, I think that's a real study of the difference between American humor and British humor. And, I tend to appreciate both. Okay,
me too.
So, yeah, because you like Fresh Prince. So anyways, check out Martin. I think you'll be encouraged by some of his character work. All right, so when you look at the landscape, I mean, look, I think much like you, when I look at the landscape, I think my concern, my question to society is, how far down are we going to go? How much further down can we go? Every time I think we hit rock bottom, I go, oh my goodness, wow, I didn't see that coming.
I think, listen, if as kingdom storytellers, our job is to disrupt, to restore. The devil's is to destroy, exactly. It's to destroy, and it's to destroy the family values, because he is steal, kill, and destroy.
That's an interesting distinction, man. I never thought about that. I think inadvertently throughout the conversation, we were testing, like, so quote unquote, what is the opposite, if you will, if that's even helpful thing to think about. And where I hear us landing is there's disruption and there's destruction.
That's right.
That's an interesting distinction.
And you're welcome, by the way. We've just got this download while we've been on the podcast, but I think that everything should be restoring back to his standard, which is understanding who we are as sons and daughters of the living God. The devil's is to break the family unit, to take innocence away from children, and to pervert.
Yeah.
And that's why I think we just have to be careful what we watch. And that's going for, obviously, there's some bad Christian stuff as well. And I'm not just advocating that every actor who's a believer just does Christian stuff. That's not what I'm saying. I'm actually saying nothing like
when
that.
you say that, I think what we're not necessarily addressing, but bringing up is the idea of quality, which is different than intention. Those two things are different. They both matter, but I mean, I might dare say at this point that I think intention is more important than quality. If I had to choose.
Yeah.
If I had to choose, I'd rather tell a story as we did. You remember when we first got to School of Ministry, we had to help out. This is the Bethel School of Ministry, and we had to, we took this creative elective with Teresa Dedman, somebody who broke open creativity at Bethel, and we got to go to, and maybe we'll chat about this as we wrap up. Do you remember when we went to that elementary school and we taught about story and acting? I think that what we did there, and you have some really cool stories about a young girl, but I think what we did there is we utilized story to disrupt at times pain, at times boredom, because there were kids starving to be creative. But man, maybe take us out with how you led a girl through an exercise and how story, in some sense, disrupted her life in the best of ways. Yeah,
so basically I did something, my acting technique is called the Dream Circle. And basically the essence of it is it's a place that you can enter. It's a piece of masking tape on the floor, which is like 6 feet in diameter. And the idea is you can enter a space of no judgment and create. And anyway, the whole class had gone through, and this girl like had a hair in front of her face. She was sat under the table right next to Alina, actually.
Not to make fun of her, but if you needed a quick picture, and again, this is not in any way the character of Wednesday, let's say, like in the Addams Family,
or the girl in The Grudge,
right? She was, she obviously had a lot of heaviness, a
lot of heaviness, hair in front of her face. Anyway, it was her time to go, and I said, will you come? And she was like, no, she couldn't. She was petrified. So I got in the circle with her and said, I'm safe. So I took her hand. She jumped in the circle, then jumped out. And I'm like, that's amazing. Great progress. I'm not looking for perfection, but progress.
She took a leap of faith.
Then about 2 minutes later, she'd brushed her hair back and said, can I go in again?
Wow.
She went in again and started singing a song.
Oh my gosh. I forgot that.
There was a 9-week thing. By the end of that 9 weeks, she'd become the leader of a group.
Oh my gosh.
They'd written this play. She directed it. And she was the forefront of it. And I was like, wow, all people are looking for is permission with a place of non-judgment, specifically when it comes to artistry, because we're worried about, like, for one, does it disrupt too much? It's like a baby. Are people going to like it? Are they not going to like it? Does it reflect me? Does it reflect the kingdom well? What's the tone of the piece? Is it the right tone for my audience?
I think for me, that story of the young girl whose journey began, if you think of just her story there, which is only one small part of it. She's got a whole life. Who knows where she is today? And we hope she's well and blessed.
Yep.
But her story was under the table with spiritual, emotional pain and heaviness. Who knows what the backstory on that is? And by the end, she was in that same circle, that circle of safety, that circle of risk, that circle of permission that you gave her, writing her own story. Man, right. I mean, if that's not disruptive storytelling, then I don't know what is.
And then that disruption led to transformation.
So good, man. Well, guys, it's been great hanging out with you here on Storia, where we've been exploring disruptive storytelling. Remember to subscribe, like, download, and give us that 5-star review, and we'll see you soon.
See you next time.